more than ever before. The capacity of nations to uphold their sovereignty is being put to the test. The manufacturing industry stands as one of the key pillars driving visible transformation across the globe. We bring you this exclusive interview with His Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, to explore this question.
ክቡር የፌዴሪ ጠቅላይ ሚኒስትር ዶክተር አብይ አህመድ
Your Excellency Dr. Abiy Ahmed, Prime Minister of Ethiopia, thank you very much for giving us some of your valuable time to join EBC for this interview.
እኔም እጅግ አመሰግናለሁ።
የመደመር መንግስት መጽሐፎትን ሳነብ
In reading the Maddemer State book you wrote, my initial expectation was that the book would be all about politics. However, it turned out that, while addressing political and social aspects, the book also deals at length with industry. This shows that not only as a national leader, but also as a citizen, you think and reflect deeply on this sector. I raise this because it is closely connected to the question I am about to ask. Countries give higher priority to the manufacturing industry sector over other sectors. Why it is so?
ከመጀመሪያው አስተያየት አዘል
Beginning with our initial question, which contained multiple implicit suggestions, the concept of Maddemer state involves maintaining balance in all things. Some governments relegated the economy to a secondary position, arguing good politics is good economics. However, it was not that much successful. Others tried the other way around, subjecting politics to a secondary position. This has its own shortcomings. The book argues that maintaining a balance between the two is essential. Without this balance, it becomes significantly more difficult to achieve the desired radical change. That is why the Maddemer state gives due attention to keeping the balance between the two. This is precisely why we are prioritizing the manufacturing industry. It is a cornerstone for any nation determined to achieve sustainable transformation and economic growth. It is the heart of any economy. Without a functioning heart, the human body cannot survive. Likewise, without a vibrant manufacturing industry, an economy cannot thrive. It is the very heartbeat of economic progress. Some even call it the motor of growth. This is mainly because its role in boosting productivity is unmatched by other sectors. For instance, a farmer with 1 hectare of land who uses industrial inputs and machinery will produce at a much higher rate and in greater quantities. The use of tractors and modern equipment enables timely harvesting, improves both the quantity and quality of output, and significantly enhances overall productivity. The same rule applies to weavers who use machinery and those who do not. Next comes export, where both quality and quantity are important to meet local demands and maintain standards. This is why it is the motor. The next critical issue is the structural transformation. The manufacturing industry plays a critical role in transitioning from one economic structure to another by enhancing supply chain, processing capacities, promoting diversification, and boosting exports. Take, for instance, our agriculture, which relied on oxen-driven farming for thousands of years and yielded limited results. However, with the introduction of industry, there has been significant encouragement and remarkable transformation. The manufacturing industry drives innovation not only for itself, but also for other sectors. It contributes to job creation and economic transformation, serving as a springboard to the next level of development. Thus, the manufacturing industry is one of the pillars of a nation's sovereignty agenda. A country can be considered a sovereign nation only when it fulfills the basic needs of its people. Unless it can adequately provide food, sufficient clothing, and essential medicines, it is difficult for individuals to live productive and meaningful lives. This can only be successful with a strong and well-developed manufacturing industry. For the reasons mentioned, the manufacturing sector plays an irreplaceable role. This is why the book and our work focus on the 5 major pillars identified by the government, one of which is the industry sector. Unless this is implemented efficiently, it will be difficult to achieve the desired prosperity.
ዳይቨርሲፋይ ለማድረግም ከጥሬ ዕቃ ወደ ፕሮሰስድ የተሻገረ ምርት ለማምጣትም ኢንዱስትሪ ከፍተኛ ሚና አለው።
የሀገራችንን ጉዳይ እንግዲህ በስፋት
We will return to the issues of our country later. For now, let us briefly consider international developments. As we speak, global dynamics are rapidly changing. Similarly, significant transformations are taking place in the manufacturing sector, including shifts in processes and its overall structure. Amid these global industrial changes, what opportunities and prospects might emerge for developing nations like Ethiopia?
ይህንን ጥያቄ ለመዳሰስ ትንሽ ሰፋ ያለ ጊዜ ይጠይቃል።
This question requires more time to answer in depth. However, to provide a general overview, and despite variations in opinion, there are a number of trends we observe. To highlight a few of them, the first trend is where is the manufacturing industry headed. I cannot capture it within a single framework, but it can be understood through key trends. The first trend is Industry 4.0, which has fundamentally reshaped our understanding of industry. Manufacturing is no longer limited to metals and smoke. It now extends to chips, data, and digital systems. Without these elements, the modern concept of industry would be incomplete. One of the core components of Industry 4.0 is artificial intelligence, AI. AI is no longer a distant concept. It is increasingly becoming part of our daily lives, even entering our homes. Its capabilities are also evident on a global scale. For instance, in conflicts such as those in the Middle East, the role of data and open-source intelligence platforms is significant. There are tools available today that allow us to observe and analyze global activities through open data, including air transport movements worldwide. Platforms gather and process information from different multiple open sources, providing insights that support decision-making. Their analytical capacity is truly remarkable. In some international institutions, and if there are to be 10 board members, one non-voting member will be AI. In our AI university, AI itself is a board member. It doesn't vote, but it comments on the agendas, provide ideas, which the rest of the member will discuss and pass decisions accordingly. The second example, the Internet of Things or IoT. It is a network of devices connected to the Internet. This includes systems for ordering, payment, and everyday devices, all linked online. IoT is becoming increasingly common in many countries, including ours. Robotics. As mentioned earlier, robots are increasingly performing tasks traditionally done by humans. For example, in a recent camel race in the Middle East, the camels were not guided by humans. Instead, robots controlled them. These races are an important part of local culture, but now robots are taking the place of humans, while the camels remain the competitors. Another core aspect of Industry 4.0 is big data analytics. This involves collecting and analyzing data from multiple sources to make informed decisions. By triangulating data from different points, companies can get insights that are closer to truth and more accurate. Digital twins, which are currently becoming popular, allow interaction with a virtual replica of a person, a system, or object to gather information before meeting or interacting with the real one. Similarly, 3D technologies are transforming industries in various ways, whether creating models of houses, products, or other objects, and are changing trends across multiple sectors. Across various sectors, some of the most critical trends include semiconductors, which are driving technological advancements, and electric vehicles, which are shaping the future of transportation. Manufacturing is also evolving, with new approaches enabling the production of medicines in both higher quantity and improved quality. Additionally, emerging trends are evident in aerospace, biotechnology, and advanced materials, reflecting the ongoing transformation of multiple industries. Nowadays, it is becoming increasingly difficult to follow the traditional practices. If you take the sectors, semiconductors are one of the critical new trends. Electric vehicles, manufacturing pharmaceuticals in both quality and quantity, and aerospace are areas in which new trends are emerging, in addition to biotechnology and advanced materials. This has its own implications, which is an inclination from cheap labor to skills. Previously, the call was that we have cheap labor, so others should come and invest. However, what is now really needed is not cheap labor, but skills. For example, the Tesla board had been arguing for some time regarding Elon Musk, particularly in relation to the amount of salary he should receive. They decided that he should get $1 trillion a year. He's one individual, yet $1 trillion amounts to the GDP of many African countries. The salary Elon Musk earns in a second may equal 2 months of an average worker's earnings. And in a minute, this is huge. Why? Due to skills, capacity, and creativity, whose share goes beyond numbers. This is at an individual level. The second trend is transitioning from the selling of raw materials to creativity. Take, for instance, NVIDIA. NVIDIA began as a modest startup some 20 years ago, but its impact has grown far beyond its origins. Rather than focusing solely on manufacturing, the company excels at generating insights and knowledge by analyzing applications across diverse industries and platforms. Today, it is valued at around $5 trillion, surpassing the combined GDP of the entire African continent. It does not have its own products, rather, its creative capacity, through its knowledge of analyzing every application and information, has made it a huge company. Having analyzed these trends, we asked ourselves what should be done, as outlined in the book. If you recall, the previous trend was to leverage the latecomer advantage. However, currently, this approach is seen as having challenges, as it can be difficult to keep up with the established competitors. The recommended solution, therefore, is to capitalize on the wages of early comers. We must capitalize on the benefits of being proactive rather than focusing on the challenges of being reactive. Let me give you an example. Aerospace is one of the critical pillars of industry. Instead of always being a buyer, at least in terms of spare parts, we decided that we need to manufacture our own spare parts. We have entered into an agreement with Boeing to manufacture spare parts, which will be launched in a couple of weeks. We are actively investing significant efforts in advancing drone production. Regarding drone production, many question values of drones for Ethiopia, not fully realizing the dangers of lagging behind. For many years, manufacturing in our industrial parks was largely centered on textiles. However, as we transitioned towards solar energy, it became evident that it can be significantly more lucrative, even when utilizing a relatively small area of land. Similarly, we are building AI University, which is the first of its kind in Africa, in order not to lag behind, being proactive and thereby benefiting from emerging opportunities. Our pharmaceuticals at Qilinto Industrial Park are meeting the highly growing local demand. Digital Ethiopia 2030 further expands Ethiopia's opportunity to benefit from emerging opportunities arising similarly from the Industry 4.0 trend in a proactive manner. Now, what is the second trend? Understanding the technology and AI is not sufficient alone. There are other trends to be taken into consideration for a fuller understanding. So the second trend is re-establishing value chains. It is becoming difficult to be certain about anything in our world, which is subject to numerous uncertainties and tensions, arising not only from potential benefits, but also from deliberate attempts to cause harm via tariffs and limiting exports. These uncertainties are further compounded by delays due to unexpected epidemics, geopolitical competition among countries. When countries are in conflict, the effects can extend to you as well. There are also threats to logistics across sea, air, and land routes. In fact, these were some of the issues we have proactively addressed. A few years ago, we raised our stance and concerns to the superpowers that activities at sea could face significant challenge, and if we have no role here, being cut off from these routes, it would pose serious risks to 130 million people. Although our warnings were not accepted at the time, they are now acknowledging our concerns. Current circumstances make it impossible to easily operate without access to the sea or air transport. Some nations may even exert control over maritime routes to either serve their own interests or even to harm others. This uncertainty has other implications. Production alone or technology alone may not make you successful. Understanding the trend is also important. On the other hand, there are some signs that can be viewed as potential solutions. And one of the most significant approaches to this is pragmatism. As highlighted in the book you mentioned earlier, pragmatism emphasizes that what you observe today may not hold true tomorrow. Therefore, you should proactively make decisions for tomorrow based on your practical interests. Let me give you an example. When the war began in Iran, prior to that, Russian oil production, which had been under sanctions, saw some of its sanctions partially lifted. Why? Because such restrictions would have harmed them as well, not just others. This was a pragmatic decision. Similarly, there are many situations where previous decisions are reversed, even regarding parties you may consider enemies or otherwise. The second strategy, which some countries have already begun to adopt and which should also be considered by us, is the +1 strategy. This involves expanding production beyond a single location. For example, a soap factory operating in Ethiopia, which may become vulnerable to market disruptions due to potential risks, could also establish production in other countries to reduce dependence on one location. This approach is often associated with nearshoring and friendshoring. Nearshoring refers to locating production closer to the target market. For instance, situating production in South Africa to serve the Botswana market, thereby reducing time and costs. In this sense, markets that aim to serve Africa should be geographically close to Africa. Friendshoring, on the other hand, involves investing in countries that are considered politically and economically stable in order to mitigate uncertainty in global trends. Although this concept is still evolving, it emphasizes directing investment towards reliable partner countries or states. As a result, the nearshoring and friendshoring +1 strategy is one of the trends in the regional supply chains. Technologies such as AI, open cloud systems, the internet, and robotics, despite their astounding performance, they cannot deliver full value unless they are able to account for uncertainty. If uncertainty is not understood, you may be able to produce, but you may not be able to sell. The third trend, I'm still staying on Industry 4.0, is logistics and infrastructure. Without superiority in infrastructure, even if the previous trends are in place, these infrastructures are special economic zones and industrial parks are becoming increasingly common. Today, there are over 6,000 free trade zones and industrial parks around the world. Many of them are evolving into integrated economic ecosystems. The major reason for this is logistics, which serves as a central element underpinning everything. Logistics includes components such as dry ports, free trade zones, industrial parks, and highways, among others. It is end-to-end. Second comes technology parks, which play a crucial role. This is not limited to industrial parks, but also encompasses technology parks, research and development hubs, and incubation centers. For example, an AI-focused university could evolve into an AI city, integrating a national cloud, hardware manufacturing, incubation and startup centers, and hardware centers. It creates an environment where they can have an impact in the tech sector. It is not just an educational facility. Expanding export-oriented manufacturing clusters is another key strategy, often referred to as export processing. This includes the development of green industry zones, as the methods of production themselves are increasingly coming under scrutiny. In this regard, our nation's experience is promising. As I mentioned, we have made encouraging progress with the AI University, which will surely be a source of pride for us and for Africa as a whole. Our industrial parks were initially focused on attracting foreign direct investment and exports. We have now begun transforming them into special economic zones and Redwa or Gada free trade zones. We are doing this as the trade chains, critical or logistics as well. The Redwa free trade zone, for instance, has a dry port within its reach. The area of land between the dry port and the free trade zone was originally 4,000 hectares. We are now reducing it to 1,000 hectares as we need to create a stronger link between the two important institutions through railways and highways. Likewise, Mojo Dry Port and Gada Free Trade Zones are similarly interconnected, supporting each other. So far, we've seen three trends, right? To add a fourth aspect, we have decarbonization. In order to remain competitive, it is essential to produce with the minimum possible carbon footprint. Factories that use renewable energy, such as solar power, are preferable. Talking about solar energy, 5 big companies have entered Ethiopia. Why? Solar is clean energy by itself. But the energy that you use to produce solar energy cells must be clean. Otherwise, it will impact the market. Producing solar energy using gas, as in some countries, and solar energy using renewable energy in Ethiopia do not have equal market values. This is because clients will ask how the energy was produced. So this is more advantageous for Ethiopia, endowed with clean energy. Secondly, we have extensive experience working with a wide range of construction materials, including cement, metals, ceramics, marble, and granite. One area that needs critical work is aluminum, which, like solar, when produced with clean energy and otherwise, will have variations of price at the global market. This is why some 5 huge companies have come to Ethiopia to produce aluminum. However, the problem is that in order to establish one aluminum factory, at least 800 megawatts of energy is needed. This means that only 2 to 3 aluminum factories would use up all the energy produced by Koysha hydroelectric power plant, which cost billions of dollars to build. So it's highly power consumptive. That is why this is on hold for the moment because of this. The third concept is the circular economy. It refers to reusing, repairing, and recycling products and materials such as metal, paper, and plastics instead of discarding them after use. This approach has become an important trend due to growing concerns about resource shortages and environmental impact. One issue related to modern production is that some materials and products are less durable than in the past. In some cases, products such as phones and cars are designed with shorter lifespans, which encourages more frequent replacement. This practice can contribute to faster consumption and waste generation, and is sometimes linked to concerns about planned obsolescence. Buying recycled products supports the circular economy by encouraging companies to reuse and reprocess existing materials, which reduces the demand for new raw resources. This is important because decarbonization is becoming a major challenge in production systems, and recycling and byproducts play a critical role in lowering environmental impact. Therefore, eco-industrial parks are expanding and managing their byproducts, and wastewater is becoming increasingly critical by implementing zero sewage discharge systems in industrial parks, which is critical to prevent environmental pollution. Our industries have more or less achieved 100% zero liquid discharge. We also use clean energy with the potential to be competent in the area. The fifth trend is the revival of government roles. The liberal ideology arguing that the government should stay out of business and leave everything to the private sector is losing traction in current trends, even in the very nations behind this ideology. They are now arguing that without government intervention, it will not be productive. So, the trend now is that the Industry 4.0 can be realized only when the government intervenes adequately, and this view is widely being promoted. To give you a few examples, countries are now only focusing on strategic sectors such as chips, but they are also introducing new measures that require nations to meet certain criteria. For example, they may insist that products be manufactured within their own countries, otherwise they may refuse to supply the necessary raw materials. This approach reflects the idea that expanding investment often requires government intervention to monitor and regulate strategic sectors. A good example of this is the issue surrounding the potential acquisition of TikTok. So it is an issue of data, like chips, which is one of the cores of Industry 4.0, as the strategic control of data is central to securing a strong position in the industry. This explains why governments are involved, often indirectly, through domestic investors participating in the acquisition processes. In order to control raw materials and the location of rare minerals, nations are intervening, which is now becoming more unlike before. So governments are intervening extensively in capacity building of local production, financial support, and a market surge. Thus, in order to be successful, you need to see these trends in a synergized manner, not separately. To save time, let me highlight the sixth trend, scaling up the manufacturing sector into the service sector. A clear example of this can be seen in the aerospace industry. Rolls-Royce, which manufactures aircraft engines, Its previous trends was selling the aircraft engines it manufactures. Its current trend has shifted to offering leasing the engines rather than selling them outright, marking a shift from its previous approach. There are also other important trends that we need to collectively understand, as they are critical. These include trends in trade, logistics, services, government directives, identifying strategic areas and inputs, protecting and supporting investors, and more. Understanding these trends is more complex than before, requiring careful analysis and coordination. Therefore, we are putting in significant effort to comprehend these trends and align them systematically to achieve complete and effective results. This is why I emphasize that the trends are very broad and multifaceted. Sorry for taking up so much of your time.
ስነ ምህዳራዊ ኢንዱስትሪያል ፓርኮች ወይም ኤኮ ኢንዱስትሪያል ፓርክስ የሚባሉት እየተስፋፉ መጥተዋል።
ከነገሩ ስፋት አንጻር እንደውም ብዙ
Considering the complexity of the matter, you have not taken much time. Thank you for your detailed explanation. Turning to our country, considerable efforts have been made to expand the manufacturing industry. Could you share your observations on these efforts from the time of the emperor to the present?
በሀገራችን ሰፊ ጥረቶች ሲደረጉ ነበር።
Thank you very much. As you said, considerable efforts have been undertaken, and it is prudent to categorize them into two distinct phases. Prior to the Second Italian invasion, the traditional cottage industry formed the majority of economic activity, predominantly with its products largely dependent on handicrafts. On the eve of the Second Italian invasion, there were about 25 factories in Ethiopia, such as soap, sugar, and beer factories. The subsequent invasion had a dual impact on the industry, generating both positive and negative effects. Around the end of the reign of the emperor, we had about 273 medium and large-scale factories. One of the major achievements of that period was that industrial expansion followed the railways. Foreign investors played a significant role, including the Japanese, the Dutch, and the Italians, both as founders and owners of various industries. Armenians, particularly, played an important role, introducing technologies such as printing industry, shoes, and others. They, including the Greeks, left their own distinct mark in introducing new industries to Ethiopia. Two critical points here to bear in mind: the number and the investors, as well as the areas of investment. The ability to sustain them or not has also had its own mark as a nation. After coming to power, the Derg nationalized factories. It also restricted the private sector, limiting individuals to a single sector or field of work and capping maximum capital at 500,000 birr. This limit negatively affected the industry or innovation. This was one of the issues of continuity. On the positive side, the government made efforts to establish large-scale industries, such as the Akaki tractor assembly plant or the Homicho ammunition engineering industry in Bishoftu. These initiatives had the potential to improve Ethiopia's position in agriculture and strengthen its military capacity, while the limitations had negative impacts on the economy. The industries in total created job opportunities for about 60,000 factory workers in a country of 25 to 30 million people at the time. The underlying ideology back then was proletarianism, which primarily benefited them and largely ignored the millions of others, a major shortcoming, as this represented barely 1% of the population, so the number was insignificant. Additionally, party committees, as they were known back then, were the sole decision makers regarding factory matters, which affected the professional skills and knowledge of the workers. Like the earlier examples I mentioned, the Greeks, the Japanese, the others during the Derg era. The countries involved were primarily the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, and East Germany, putting an end to continuity as the ideologies and nations were changed. During the early years of the EPRDF, roughly the first decade was wasted. Between 1991 and 2003, it did not exert much effort building the industrial sector. Much of the effort was focused on legally removing the limitations imposed by the Derg. The first industrial development strategy under the EPRDF government was eventually formulated in 2003 after 12 years in power. And then came election. Following that, over the next 15 years, the government's industrial initiatives achieved relatively significant progress. The government supported textile and leather export trades, provided assistance to the private sector, and initiated the development of industrial parks. The number of medium and high-level industries in the private sector increased to about 3,000. During this period, investors from Turkey, China, and India came to Ethiopia. So you see a notable loss of continuity across the three governments. Although efforts were made to develop industries, many initiatives were later undone or disrupted by the subsequent administrations. This is why we invented the ideology of Maddemer, which eliminates the harmful while preserving the useful. To give you some of the major hurdles, foreign currency shortage was the first one, not favorable for the development of blunt industries. The second significant obstacle was logistics. Transportation costs were at least twice as high as in other nations, compounded by insufficient roads, a lack of highways, and no ports, all of which adversely affected industrial growth. The third issue was connectivity. About 90% of the inputs for the factories I mentioned came from overseas. Therefore, problems such as poor connectivity, lack of connectivity, and insufficient policy reforms resulted in the industry's failure to achieve structural transformation. Thus, despite the efforts, the Emperor, Derg, and the EPRDF could not ensure continuity, leading to lack of structural transformation.
አንዱ በአንደኛው ላይ እየደመረ የአንደኛውን ሳያፈርስ የመቀጠል ትሬንዱ ውስን ልምምድ ስለነበረ የመጣ ችግር ነው።
እንግዲህ እነዚህ ክፍተቶች ካሉ
Your administration has introduced new policy reforms. What distinguishes these reforms, and how can they address past inefficiencies?
ወሳኝ ጥያቄ ነው። ይህም ጥያቄ ከለውጡ በኋላ የነበረው ነገር መጀመሪያ እነዚያ ነገሮች በቅጡ መረዳት።
This is a critical question. Following the reform, the initial step involved a thorough assessment of past successes and challenges, which revealed that a lack of continuity has been the most significant fracture in Ethiopia's nation-building process. This led to a fundamental shift in perspective, underscoring the importance of synergy fostered through the coordinated engagement of multiple sectors, diverse stakeholders, and a broad spectrum of beneficiaries. The multiplicity of these three dimensions is very essential to ensuring that continuity is both effective and sustainable. Accordingly, the government should move from being an implementer to acting as a facilitator by providing basic needs and creating enabling environment. To this effect, we devised the homegrown economic reform. One of the fractures in the macroeconomy manifested through the disruptions observed in several areas. First, it impeded the flow of foreign investment into the country. Second, productivity levels remained low, accompanied by a lack of globally competitive quality standards. Third, there was minimal connectivity between the local industries. further limiting economic integration and growth. Fourth, our stance was that as long as it was beneficial to the country, past achievements should be maintained. Let me give you an example. The railway from Awash to Mekelle is being constructed on $2.6 billion loans. In fact, commercial loans. The railway line is essential for Ethiopia in all directions. The crucial question is, how and when will it become fully functional? The $2.6 billion commercial loan railway project may take 40 to 50 years to recover its investment, since there is insufficient freight to transport. On the other hand, we are working on fertilizer production in collaboration with Dangote, which will be finalized in about 40 months. The total investment of the fertilizer production plant is around $2.5 billion. In addition, this project will more than double Ethiopia's current fertilizer production. Now, compare it with the price of the railway. Not only will the plant start providing services in a couple of years, but it will undoubtedly also recover the invested amount within 5 to 9 years' time. If we had invested the money in fertilizers instead of the railways, we could have used the returns from that investment to build the railways by now. So the investment as a nation is unproductive. Secondly, the industrial parks, which utilized $1.6 billion in loans, were intended for the construction of real estate in industrial sheds or homes. However, the development was fragmented across regions, reducing overall effectiveness. Had the investments been managed properly, such as in gas, phase 1 or 2, which is essential for Ethiopia, we would be reaping the benefits today. Take sugar. Regarding sugar, when we assumed power, the factories were at their weakest. For instance, the Wenji sugar factory faced significant operational and financial challenges, leading to staff layoffs, reduced production, and an inability to sustain salary payments. To ensure operational continuity, as mentioned earlier, we successfully completed the project at Omo 2 and 3 and Kurras, finalized Beles and restored Fincha and Metahara and Wenji sugar factories. These facilities are now fully operational and profitable. There are some still needing our attention as they are very vast. However, one can imagine the significant benefits that could have been realized if we had been able to expand further. For example, the highways constructed from Mojo to Awasa have proven highly beneficial. Expanding similar infrastructure projects to other regions of the country would obviously yield substantial economic and social gains. The Mojo to Awasa highway, constructed at a cost of over $700 million, and that was borrowed, is unlikely to repay the loan within the next 3 to 4 decades. However, if such a highway had been built to connect Djibouti, it would undoubtedly have been far more beneficial in terms of trade and economic return. So the issue was not the investment per se, but the loans, the place, and the priorities leading to debt burden and macroeconomic imbalances. Take, for instance, stadiums in our universities. The same issues apply to universities across different regions and zones throughout Ethiopia, which comes from lack of observing emerging trends, as they will be diminished in 40 or so years from now. You can take the lesson at home now in shorter period of time. This is what Industry 4.0 depicts. What is needed is limited, high-quality universities, not scattered across the zones, as it stands now, like poor-quality condos. On the other hand, the construction of universities should have come after the establishment of adequate nursery schools, which were fewer than 10 at the time. the cost of constructing just one university could have been sufficient to build numerous kindergartens across the country. So we have had to build over 34,000 kindergartens over the past 6 to 7 years, as early childhood education is the fundamental element. We also need to address the backlog of expanding elementary and high schools, which should have been undertaken previously. Similar issues are also observed in the construction of stadiums by universities and cities. We sometimes see 2 stadiums in a city, as in Awassa City Stadium and Awassa University Stadium, which often do not meet CAF standards. If we merged the 2 into one standard stadium, the beautiful Awassa City would attract many professional footballers from Africa. This is an issue we see everywhere, not just in Awassa. Likewise, hospitals are being built with the intention of accommodating, let's say, 1,000 beds in different parts of a country. The issue here is that they cannot be fully equipped as they are big, as in the case of Harar, which has been stalled. Thus, they fall short of required standards, are poorly equipped, and fail to function properly due to the absence of essential equipment and facilities. So you see the building, or condominium if you will, without the necessary equipment, leading to also to embezzlement in the process of construction. In connection to urbanization, nation building is most effective when people live closely, whereas scattered communities make it more difficult to foster national cohesion. Any government committed to prosperity should prioritize urbanization, efficient tax collection, and the provision of services in close proximity, along with promoting better public understanding and engagement. So we had to rectify these fractures as well. We have maintained and upgraded factories initiated by the Derg administrations, such as the Homicho industry, which has resulted in the enhancement of their production capacity. Likewise, we have continued the stalled industrial parks. We did not abandon the sugar factories, either simply because they were started by the EPRDF. We redirected the others based on their feasibility and potential impact, thereby ensuring continuity. Our investors come from Russia, China, Turkey, Italy, including nationals, who played prominent roles across all 3 regimes. Since the results of industrial processes are gradual and not immediately visible, we have been following this cycle, and now we can say that the results are improved.
ምርት ማምረት ምርት ወደ ኳሊቲ ማሳደግ ከዛ ገበያ ማፈላለግ ጊዜ ይፈልጋል። ይሄንን ዑደት ነው ስንከተል የነበረው ውጤቱም በእጅጉ ሻል ያለ ነው ማለት ይቻላል።